Here we go. We're in.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Welcome back, everyone. If you're tuning in live or if you're watching the replay, you could always send over or blah blah blah. You could always send over a comment and say hello to us. Welcome back to Self Care is My Job. It's summertime and it's the summer of love. I don't know if anybody saw, a couple of my posts. I'm trying to shift our theme for the summer. It's summer of love. We're going to be talking about self-love and how really, really how you recultivate that amongst all of the bullshit, right? So I have an amazing guest here with me. Melissa, how are you? How are you doing today?
Hi, Sam. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation. It's so good. Yeah, I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
Good. And you're from Texas, right?
I am. I'm in Houston. It's
How's the
we're
weather there
definitely
today,
feeling
by the
summer.
way?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
definitely feeling summer. I think it's about 91 or so.
It's
The
actually the
humidity
same
is,
here today in New Jersey, and I was
it
I
does
couldn't
get
even
hot
let.
there.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. Who knows? In 2 days it could be 60 again. It's
Oh,
crazy here, but it could come out of nowhere. But yeah, I couldn't even let my kids play on the playground after school today. I was like, we got to go. We got to go home.
oh yeah, it's sweltering. The humidity, I think you probably get some of the humidity like we get down here too. It's like
Yeah.
100%. It's ridiculous.
I feel like we get the extreme of every kind of weather you get in New Jersey.
You do,
Whatever
you do.
it's a mixed pot. We get it all. It's insane. Um, but I feel you though, because I know that you guys are sweating down there regularly.
Keeps
um,
us young, supposedly.
yeah, there you go. I like that part too. Um, so yeah, we're gonna talk about all kinds of things today. But I always just like to start by inviting you to tell us about yourself and tell us how you got into the coaching space, what you do now, why you do it, all of the good stuff. I always love to know how did you land in this space?
Yeah. So it's interesting. And I know we were chatting before you hit record, and you asked me how long I've been in coaching. And it's funny when I look back now, I can see that I was always on this path. Um, but I didn't realize it until really about a year ago. I had some inkling, maybe a couple of years ago. Um, but I have always been a student of self growth, personal development. I was always very drawn to that, psychology. And I never pursued it earlier on. I thought I needed to follow the footsteps of my mom and go into the corporate world. And so I got my degree in marketing, which is, the psychology of why people buy things, right? So that's as close
Mhm.
as I got. This is as close as I got. But I I did a lot of work on myself. I realized that there were a lot of tools that I didn't necessarily get when I was growing up. And so really started honing in on that. And then once I got married and started thinking about having a family, I knew I really needed to stay in that work so that I could be a good model for my kids. Um, and so, although I was doing that, I've got three kids. They're almost 11, 7, and almost 2 now. Um, But around the time my second daughter was, she was probably 2 years old. So about 5 years into, or 7 years in, somewhere around there, into my motherhood journey, probably around 5. I just remember waking up one day and, I had created this life that, had the marriage and the house. I didn't have the white picket fence, but the picture, the two kids, the dog, I had everything that I thought I ever wanted. And really, I mean, life is good, but I really just felt like something was missing and I couldn't pinpoint it. And I felt bad. I felt guilty because I think what I realized was that it wasn't fulfilling at all, like I thought it would be. And so I realized I needed to get some help with that and exploring what that was.
Mhm.
And so I found a therapist, and the first, we did a lot of work together. One of the first things she introduced to me was boundaries and asked me how my boundaries were. And I know we want to talk about that later, but so I've really just started diving in deeper and doing the work. And so progress a few years down the line, my my work background has been in banking and in sales, and love the relationship piece of it. But I also felt like um, there was more. There was something more that I had to share. But it took me a very long time to figure out what that was, because you're I was caught up doing life, working full time, raising the kids, and I really never put any focus on it. And so about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to take a step back from that, and I worked with a coach to figure out my life purpose. And we got pretty close. We got really close. I know identifying, what it is I wanted to do. Um, but I needed to go back to work in the meantime while I was sort of solidifying it all. And I went back to work in banking, and I immediately found out I was pregnant, which I was not expecting. So,
Mm.
um,
Surprise.
yeah, surprise, surprise. And so, such an amazing blessing now, but at the moment, that wasn't part of the plan.
Yeah.
This was like my time to focus on what I wanted, and figuring out how to pursue my dreams. And so it felt like a setback at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but I focused on the pregnancy, doing what I needed to do. And what happened was I went back to work. I was completely overwhelmed having three kids, being full time job. I had always struggled with anxiety, but it sort of came in like peaks and valleys. And so I was at a real peak, and I was searching and for something other than, because I was still seeing a therapist. I was still doing all the things I needed to do, but I was just determined that I could use that my brain was wanted to work with me. I just needed to learn how to work with my brain. Um, and so I found a coaching program, and I went through it, and it really opened my eyes to just a completely new set of tools that helped me release my anxiety. And once I was able to release the anxiety, it was like so clear to me that I wanted to go into coaching, just because I saw how powerful it was when someone could um, see see clearly a belief that you hold, and help you work through it and help you shift it, and how you
Mhm.
would just let things go in an instant almost sometimes, and
Mhm.
how incredibly powerful that was after doing all of this work for years and years. It felt like sort of like a there was progress, but it was like a slow trudge. First doing it on my own, and then in therapy, it just felt like, wow, there's still so much to be done here. And then going through coaching and having someone like just work on you for a few weeks, incredible, incredible shifts, and just completely transformed me. So I've realized, all these things have been leading me here this entire time, and that there was nothing holding me back from starting today.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
I hope
yeah.
that wasn't too long, but
No,
that's the
no.
journey.
That's I need to know. Yeah. Um, it's so interesting how you said that too. Like what was holding me back from doing all these things that were that were teeing up the whole time, and then what's stopping you from doing it right now? I think I can relate to that so much. I think that one of the things, especially when I became a mother, I think that when I was in corporate before I had my kids, that my anxiety helped me in a way. Like I kind of
Mm,
thrived on it a little bit because it allowed me to, like, it was almost like a tool that I could use to always be better and deliver more every single
mm,
time, because that's the goal. Like, I was in publishing, and a lot of people think that that must be just this, like, fun, light industry, but it's actually incredibly cutthroat. And so there was always this, yeah, this pressure to, every time you deliver something, and it's not just that industry. Obviously, I'm well aware that that's many industries. You deliver something, and the next time it better be 10 times better. It better be,
mm,
you're always, trying to top yourself. So that anxiety, I think, served me in a way, not in a healthy
mm,
way, but it served me in a way in that space. And then, so it was almost like I didn't realize it was an issue until I had kids. And then I tried to be the perfect mom. And I
mm,
tried so hard to fit that, um, corporate mentality of always being the best, because you have to be the best. Otherwise, you're not going to get the promotion, and you're not going to get the raise, and you're not going to get the next job and the next job and the next job. So you have to be the best. But taking that into motherhood or even other, areas of life, it's not a good fit. So then my anxiety turned into a disaster, because there's no such thing as perfect parenting. There's no such thing as a perfect mother. It doesn't exist. So, because you're not, chiseling out a sculpture that somebody one day might look at and say that's perfect. You're working with a person that you can't even, like, they're a person. You can't control everything about that little human that you're
mm.
caring for and guiding. Some of it has nothing to do with you. So anyway, it's
Right.
like, realizing that I took so much of that anxiety, so much perfectionism into motherhood, and I think that that was it's just like, our stories really align in that way, because it was a major turning point for me, realizing how much that was not working was my, um that was my reason for self-care. Like, that was my reason why self-care was so desperately necessary, because I was in a
Mm,
space of, like, who the hell am I if I'm not that? If I'm not the
right.
perfect mom, just like I was the perfect employee before, and trying to check off all these boxes, like you said too, the job, the family, the house, all of that. If I'm not like this that I've been aspiring to be and told to be, then who the hell am I? Um, so that's like what the beginning of that journey was. But you said a couple things that really hit home for me also in your story. Um, and by the way, thank you for mentioning about, your therapy journey. I'm over here also, like, the number one, like, advocate for therapy. Like, definitely, like, my therapist is like my best friend. She's really not, but I wish she could be. I
Yeah,
wish she could
right.
be. Like, I think
No.
we've actually discussed that, where I'm like, this is actually kind of sad that I can't be like your best friend after this, or I don't know. I don't know what the rules are. But
That's
what you
hilarious. I
mentioned
totally get it.
was the work. Yeah. Um what you mentioned was the work that you were doing based on tools that weren't given to you in childhood, like, that weren't taught to you.
Wow.
So I didn't know if you could elaborate on that, like, even if it's just one thing that that you weren't taught how to do, or how to regulate, or how to, you know, deal with, that was helpful
Oh
for
my
you
gosh.
to, grow.
Oh my goodness. There's so many.
I know. Well, that's why I'm like,
There's
even if
so
it's just
many.
one or two.
And it's, and this is not, like, not blaming my parents. I mean, they didn't have these tools either, and so how could they
Right,
teach me?
right.
Um, but one that I've only recently come to realize over the past year or two is that I didn't really know how to feel my feelings, and I struggled. Not really. Um, always weighed more than I wanted to. So, and I have this intense sweet tooth. that, I did tons of research on it, and I was like, there's something brain based here. And what I realized was that I was, eating my feelings. And it's incredible. It's crazy. I wouldn't have believed it if you told me this, but as soon as I started feeling my feelings, my sugar cravings, like, it vanished.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's like magic. Um, so that was one. And then I guess the other major one, it was the boundaries. Like, I didn't know, and this is still work I'm in, like taking responsibility for my feelings, right? And for my preferences. And I realized I had so much anger and
Mm.
resentment built up. And anyone who knows me is always like, Melissa's the sweetest person, you'll ever meet. And you're just so sweet. It's all I've ever heard my entire life. And then to realize that I was actually pretty angry, pretty resentful, was
Mhm.
like, oh, that was a hard pill to swallow. Um, but it came from like unexpressed needs and preferences and not feeling the feelings and all of that. I think those are two really huge ones.
Yeah. That is Thank you for sharing that. It's like a perfect example of what we were talking about before we hopped on, right? Like the fact that one thing leads to another in this like healing journey, because it's like once you peel back one layer, the next layer is available for viewing and for working with it. So you're like, "Oh, okay, so like this is why I do this." I always talk about
Mhm.
self-awareness, because I feel like it's the first step to like literally anything. And so many of us, and it's and even before that, right? Of course, the yoga teacher in me is like, before that, you have mindfulness and a presence practice. And I'm not saying, that you have to sit and meditate for, 10 to 30 minutes to have a presence practice, or to practice mindfulness. But the only way that you get to a place of self-awareness is to slow the hell down,
Yes.
because we are literally, so like, that's what I've been kind of talking about lately, is just like, actually, before self-awareness you need to slow down, because so many of us are in
So,
this, yeah, we just live in this go 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 mentality, this very, high level of masculine energy in our society, where it's like deliver more, do more, again, same energy as that corporate space, right? And like, which I know, you experience too. And there's a time and a place for that. And like, that's all well and good too. It's just that when there's this overexpression of it, where we don't feel like we deserve or have even the ability to invite ourselves to slow down, like, how do we become aware of anything that's going on with us, let alone move through a full arc of emotion, like like you were talking about, actually, there's so much, we're set up for failure in so many areas when it comes to feeling our feelings, because not only do we don't like slow down enough to give us the time to do it, because you're probably like on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. I would like to think maybe it's like more like that up here than where you are. Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, we're up here in New Jersey, like, oh man, like, I went down to Texas and everything was like so much slower, and it was like hard to handle, and I'm over here. That was probably me like a few years back being like, I can't handle it. And now I'm over here like, slow down.
Yes.
um, but so everything comes back around. But that ability to become mindful of the fact that you even have a sensation going on that you need to allow to, complete its course. Actually identify it. What's going on? Tightness in my chest, lump in my throat,
Mhm.
whatever. Eyes are itching, ears are whatever it is. There is going to be something that is cueing you to pay attention to your body and to tune in. Again, of course, the yogi over here has to, like bring that to attention. But But even if it's just for the simple fact of like, it doesn't even need to be all that. It's like when you are triggered, allowing that to be a cue, even if it's like, like you, it's not, oh, like I can't pinpoint the sensation, but I know I'm pissed off, or whatever it is. Fine, good. That is a cue to grow. That is an opportunity to grow because it's
Right.
an opportunity for self-awareness. And then once we have the awareness, we can see more clearly. If we're willing to sit with it and dissect it a little, we can see what we need to let go, which we were talking
Yes.
about too. Um, this is
I
why
should
what you
not.
were saying. Say that again. Go ahead. Continue.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I glossed over a piece of this, which I I shouldn't have, knowing who I'm speaking to.
I tend to do that too. It's okay. It's hard, right? It's hard to feel that comfort of like, oh, like am I going all the way into this? Like I totally get I totally get it.
Well, so before I joined this coaching program, like once I was in that peak of anxiety, a friend actually called me one day, and I had wanted to learn how to meditate for the longest time, but I would never sit down for longer. Like I couldn't sit down for 5 minutes, and I would maybe attempt it every few months. Um, and she called me one day, and we were arranging a play date, and she was like, "Oh, how are you?" And I like completely lost it. And I was having a
Mm,
really hard day, and she invited me to like a 30-minute session that happened daily for meditation. And
wow.
it was amazing just I mean, to be able to go from 0 to 30 minutes was like, it was hardcore. But, it was like you get to a point where sometimes, at least, it's been the case for me, where you're just like willing to do anything to feel better. And
Mm,
so that definitely was a key part of my journey, and it contributed even for I created a method called the care method, and the first piece of that is really that mindfulness piece. um, and so it was hugely important, and um, yeah, I can't believe I neglected to mention
so you
that.
went, hey, that's okay. Um so you went from no meditation experience to meditating for 30 minutes.
Yes, guided.
Right. But it's like, yep, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Guided, not whatever, breath led, whatever it is, whatever
Hmm.
works. That's what you do.
Yes,
Um,
that's true.
yeah, I mean, because I always say this to people, because obviously, beginning, end of a yoga class, like, most, I mean, yeah, in Shavasana at the end of a yoga class, like it is, in most cases, it's guided, but a lot of
Yes.
times it depends on the teacher, right? A lot of times it's just like, I can guide, and I do both. I think it depends on my mood, but I will just have it be where I'm just guiding people in their breath and to stay with that, which I think I could see how that could be harder, you know, um, especially if you're not, if you're used to coming to yoga class and you have that experience, then probably not, because you get real used to staying with your breath at that point. But I always just try to talk about things like this when they come up, because I just want to always like debunk any misconceptions around meditation, because I just feel like I don't even care. Like say you went and you were there for 30 minutes, but your thoughts, and I'm sure probably the first, or second time, right? Like your thoughts are still jumping around inside your head.
Oh,
You
yeah.
still feel like I should be doing this instead of doing that, instead of doing what I'm doing. Um, and all that comes with it. But I always like to talk about, like, even if that's happening, just the simple fact that you paused in your day, even if the thoughts are jumping around still, just the simple fact that you paused and you're remembering how to pause, and even though it is uncomfortable, you're still staying in that discomfort, and that practice in itself is like invaluable, like it's just
Hmm.
it's so necessary. So it's like I always just like to talk about that. because I think people are like, well, I can't meditate because my brain doesn't shut off. Meditation is not about turning your brain off. And the fact that so many people have success with guided meditation should be a perfect example of that, because your brain is not turning off. It's tuning in. It's like the difference between being in constant reaction to your external world, and then giving yourself the space to tune in.
Mm.
I don't know. I always feel like once I really grasped that concept, I realized that I was always able to do that as a child. I was always able to do that,
Mm.
to be with myself and be like really, real. And, now I see it as connecting to my higher self, you know,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, almost like a little conversation that's going on inside, and it doesn't have to do with
Mhm.
anybody else but me. Um, Maybe that would have landed me in a hospital at some point in life, but hopefully, I think we're at a point now in our evolution as humans where it's like we're starting to understand how freaking important that connection to self is.
Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's like I just love that you did bring that up, because again, if that's not your ideal form of self-care, meditation, then throw that out the window and just work on pausing. That's what I tell people, like, just work on sitting down and allowing yourself to remember how to do that. Or, sit down and journal. Like, maybe you want to have that
Yeah.
conversation with yourself and just sit down and journal and, like, brain dump information. These are all these different kinds of, so it doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be meditation. It doesn't have to be journaling. It doesn't matter what the hell it is. It just matters what it does for you, so that
Right.
you can. And that's why I end up, I mentioned this a few times in recent weeks, that I feel like my business is even eventually probably going to go to like more specifically spiritual self-care, because
Mm.
what the most important piece for me in that is reconnection to self. So you have, and don't get me wrong, there are physical forms of self-care that could also be spiritual. Like people say, right, all the time, that when they're working out, I've met so many people that they're like, oh, when I work out, I'm like so in my zone, in the zone
Yeah.
or whatever. In the zone is meditation. It's the same thing. It's really the same thing. I always try to compare that with meditation. Prayer is the same. It's all doing the
Yeah.
same thing. So just putting that out there, that it's like, it doesn't have to be this or that, but like, find your thing that's going to
That's
connect you
exactly right.
back to yourself, because we are in this society that for so long has just overvalued our connection to everything else, and what I can or should do for this person, or how this person is triggered or reacting to what I'm doing. It's like, how does that sustain? It's not sustainable. I can't control what anybody does.
Right.
So, you can only, it's why we always say too, right? It starts with you. So,
Yes.
it's beautiful. You also mentioned, and of course, like, if anything that I just said, you feel like you want to respond to, you can. Um, but I did, pull out something from your story too that jumped out at me, as far as not feeling like fulfilled by all of that you had created, right? The kids, the house, this
Mm.
and that. Um, it so obviously same. Like, I had a very, very
Mhm.
similar experience. Um, and I think that almost every mom who's on some kind of, spiritual journey or personal growth journey is, it's like the first thing that comes out, right? Where they're like, "Oh, okay. So like, I was taught or guided to believe that these were all the boxes that I had to check off as a woman, and as a, you know, post motherhood, whatever, or pre motherhood." Um, and now I'm not, and none of it fulfilled me. Why? Because those are all things that are outside of ourselves.
Mm.
Total all things that
So
are,
true.
again, completely outside of ourselves. So we lose ourselves, we can go down that road. That's a long discussion in itself, as far as like, the things that you sacrifice, and that you're taught that you're supposed to sacrifice parts of like your true self for the greater good of your household and family,
Oh yeah.
um and this and that. So then of course we come to a place of not feeling fulfilled, even though it's supposed to just fill every dream that we ever had, but it doesn't do that. um and I just try to normalize that as much as possible. I still feel like I still meet moms who like can't even say that out loud,
Yeah.
like who can't
Oh
even say
yeah.
it. um yeah.
No, it's and our conversations with moms, it's like mm, I had one recently, and we were um, I'd given her some homework to do, and it was around her goals and her dreams, and I had to ask her some questions because her goals and dreams still involved her kids,
Mhm.
and I was like, these are your, that clarification. These are no, these are yours, and it's okay to have your own. It doesn't mean we love our kids any less
Mhm.
because I think that gets very confusing. Sometimes it's like we feel like if we're taking something for us, then we're taking away something from our family
Yeah.
or from other people. Um, and it's just, yeah, that goes back to, I guess, early beliefs from our culture, from our family,
Right.
wherever we picked them up along the way. Um, that, we have to be so self sacrificing, the martyr.
Right. And then there's
And
that. Yeah, continue.
oh, I was just going to say, and where do we end up when our kids go off and create their own lives? That's sort of what I think about when I think about the work that I'm doing with moms. Is like, then you're gonna need help now, and you're gonna potentially, I want to say, waste all these years, but not really um, live the life that you could, like fully enjoying life in the moment with these beautiful kids that you love so much. Um, you didn't get a chance to fully enjoy them because you didn't fill your own cup first. It sounds so trite to say put your own oxygen mask on first, but it's like it's so true. I reminded my kids of this last night. It's like if mommy does takes 20 minutes to do her exercise and her then I am going to stay healthy so that I can take care of you and I can live a long
Mhm.
time and I can be with you. And so um yeah, just think of how many moms have not necessarily taken full advantage of these childhood years, and then the kids go off and they have an identity crisis.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have
I think
no
that
idea
that
who they
was
are.
one of my very yeah. I think that that was one of my very first, like, the reason why I wanted to do what I do of working with moms as well, because I saw it so clearly. Like, for me, like we were talking about, I had such a high level of anxiety and perfectionism, and paired that with losing my career, that I had put like my whole identity into that, and being laid off but right before I had my first child. So again, like we talk about how things were just like, always teeing that we're always supposed to be that way. You pair my anxiety and perfectionism with that major identity shift that I had to deal with. And that's what kind of brought down this idea of self care into my awareness, which I wasn't like talking about it in this way at the time. It's just that this is exactly how and why it panned out, because I needed
Mm,
to start doing the things that would fill my cup. Otherwise, things were going to get real bad. Right. So, but that was so early on in my motherhood journey. So it's not, oh, I'm having an identity crisis when the kids leave for college, um, because I put all of my um, eggs in their basket. I'm having an identity crisis now at the beginning of my motherhood journey, because of this major identity shift that I didn't expect it to be. It's one thing to become a new mother, regardless, that's an identity shift, but to also have
Mhm.
to adjust to this entire new lifestyle without a corporate piece, like without a corporate career. And, needless to say, right, that was validating me, my career, my title, my salary, all of it validating me. Um, meaning, meaning it's a replacement for true self-love, right? Like it's not, it's validating me and making me feel very important and needed, and it's fulfilling my need for approval, but it's
Yes.
not like giving me love. Like, it's not filling me with love and joy and true acceptance. So, all of that happening early on in motherhood, I think was all meant to be for me, because it was like almost like I had to go through all of it right then and there to see how, oh my God, yeah, like women go through an entire, uh, you know, 20 years of mothering before they are, and then they look at themselves and go, oh, now I can start to put myself first. Now I have time to, and they don't even know how, because they're in
Right.
that martyr like mentality. And that could get, you know, ideally it's worked out at that point, ideally, it doesn't matter what age you are, right? You can jump into, self-development and to going to therapy and doing whatever the hell you need to do at any point. But then there's that also, like, talk about what you mentioned before, unexpressed feelings, unaddressed anger, resentment, bitterness. Once we take on that martyrdom, that's what comes with it. That's
Mhm.
like the definition, right, of a martyr, and that's exactly what it is. It's like that self. What's weird is like that self-sacrificing. You get bad a badge or a medal for that. Like you
Mhm.
get the good mom medal every time you sacrifice yourself for your kids. You get the check off that box. But what you also get, doesn't matter who you are. I think it's like if you're a human, you're also going to get this thing that's like that resentment, that bitterness of like, well, even if you don't feel it right away, it's going to come because you did not prioritize yourself. You said no to yourself.
Yeah.
Um but that's just, of course, that bitterness, that resentment is in relation to everyone else. But again, it all starts with us, like, so this is why I also work with moms, because it's like, guess what? Like, you don't need anyone else. But it's also, and I'm sure you've gone down this road too, it's like once a mother can step out of that martyrdom and self-sacrificing and subservient role, we shift culture by shifting ourselves in these individual ways as women and as
Yeah.
mothers. Like, it shifts everything. Um and, there's something to be said, yes, about putting your oxygen mask on first so that you can show up fully for your kids. But just to be clear, and more, show up more fully and energized and wholeheartedly for your kids, for your partner. But I always have to say this, it's like, ain't nothing wrong with you doing something just for the sake of doing it for yourself also.
That's
You know, it
that is
doesn't have
right.
to be for anyone, to make sure that you're well for other people. It could just feel really good. Like,
Right?
um, there's that,
Yeah.
so that's
What's
that
wrong with
connection to
that?
self,
What's wrong with
right?
that?
Like, yeah, there's a meme that I saw floating around that was like, it's not, oh God, what was it? It was like, it's not me first, it's me too. As far as moms, self-care for
Mm,
moms, right? And I'm like, "Ooh, I don't like that one. Mm-mm, don't like that
mm,
one because it could also be me first, and that's fine." Like, why does it have, you just stigmatized me first.
yeah.
Obviously, we're not talking about, who's getting the last seat on the life raft. Obviously, that's not the situation that we're addressing here, right? Like, come on. Relax. This is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, it's all
Yes.
it's every there's like this sense
That is
of
such a good
urgency
point.
around everything that a mother does, right? And or like scrutiny, really, right? Like that's kind
Yeah.
of what it is. That's what it feels like, at least.
Yes.
And it's so, in other words, scrutiny around, God forbid, a mother says me first. Again, we're not talking about the last seat on a life raft. We're talking about maybe like me first means, doesn't it talk about, here's our segue into boundaries. Doesn't it just mean wait? Doesn't it just mean
Yeah.
wait? Be patient? I have to
Mm.
say, like, whenever I talk about boundaries, which is great because we can go into that now, is like, that's what I've probably said this a million times on this show already, but that's that's my hard boundary in this house. Mommy does not multitask. So, because it gives
Mm.
me anxiety. So wait, and I just think that, and that could mean I literally just don't want to do more than one thing at a time, or I'm in the mid I need time, like you said, like I need 20 minutes. I need 20 minutes. I need space right now. 20 minutes is going to make a world of difference. So, wait.
Yes.
If
Oh
you
my gosh.
even if it's like you can't reach the paper or the glue or whatever it is, so
I
like you
know.
can't do that thing that you
Right.
want so badly to do right now. Sorry. Wait. Like you
Yes.
got this.
I
you know.
know. My middle child is one's very, very impatient. Well, I mean, most kids are, but she really, yeah. So I love that
I mean,
when
and
you're saying
age
that. It's like,
obviously is a factor too, obviously, of the children, but
yes, clearly.
yeah.
But she's at age where she can start to understand that. But I'll never forget, yeah, years ago when I first kind of started working with a therapist, she was like, well, what if you just came home and you just took 15 minutes to just, you know, decompress, unplug from the day, and then you can go into mommy mode. And I was like,
How do I do
no,
that?
I
Yeah.
cannot do that. I cannot do that. It just seemed like that was completely impossible. Um, Whereas now, like I realize I need a lot of time. I need a lot of space. I
Mhm.
do. And I just have to, yeah, you just have to teach people how to treat you. And that includes your kids too.
Mhm.
I mean, um, and I realize even sometimes I'll slack off on the boundaries and like you have to keep repeating yourself with children over
Yeah.
and over and over again. It just sometimes feels like it's never ending, like the mommy's in the bathroom and the door it's like the door flies open. I'm like, you're 10 years old now, it's time for you to like really get the message
Yeah.
that people deserve privacy. But yeah, like that's something that I have to continue to work on is just reminding them and not getting frustrated by the fact that I have to remind them. But I used to get very, very frustrated. Like, why can't they just get it?
Mhm.
And not just with kids, but also with my spouse, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
That I was just going to say that as well. It's this conversation of boundaries, and to be clear, like we're making the connection now between telling treating people or teaching people how to treat you is what you just said, which is perfect. Um, and the connection between that and self-love, really. Cuz it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
how do you, if everything is a yes, even when it doesn't fulfill you, which can be everything from filling all those boxes of like the perfect life, the house, the kids, the dog, the this, the that. So we're saying yes to all of these things. And then, even for everything that goes with that, right? Like the parties for the kids and like everything that paints that picture,
Hmm.
but gives us more shit to do and
Yeah.
more things to navigate, and takes away from the space that we still need for ourselves. Because that space and time and energy is finite. It's not infinite. It you know, like we have to it has to come from somewhere. So, you know, prioritizing yourself is that act of self-love, but we can't do it. And one of the ways that, like, I talk about this all the time, it's like, so, you know, setting boundaries is a form of self-care. It's actually one of,
Yes.
for a mom, it's the one of the most important types of self-care, that because it
Hmm.
helps you navigate what's between you and more self-care. Um,
Hmm.
you know, and the other one is asking for support, like actually
Oh,
being
yes.
willing to ask the question. But when you were talking about, you know, your partner, we I just did, or you know, how this fits into that relationship piece, because I just finished a self-care for moms workshop, which was so like eye-opening, and like I just am so thankful to the women who joined me and were forthcoming with like all of the details of like what their obstacles are, right? And sadly, a lot of it, which I knew would be the case all along, right? Like a lot of it would does have to do with our relationships, because gender roles are a thing. And
Mm,
it's all that sort of embedded programming of what I'm supposed to do as the woman versus you're supposed to do as the male, if that's your setup in your household. But it doesn't really matter, because there's almost always like a role that takes on more of the mother load of responsibilities, and then the other side of things. But yeah, I mean that, and so what came out of that mostly was learning how to relearning how to have these vulnerable, open conversations about what you really need,
yeah.
because some of us don't. I mean, we were talking about how the like tools we weren't taught. It's all in the same box of not knowing how to fully feel our feelings. We don't know how to communicate our feelings either, obviously.
No.
If we don't even allow ourselves to go through the whole arc of emotion, how do we ever learn how to vulnerably communicate how we're feeling and therefore what we might need? So instead, we just sit in that irritability, bitterness, and resentment for somebody not coming and being like, "Oh, you look stressed." you know, let
Yes.
me help you out.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's been interesting because my husband is actually from Nicaragua, and the cultural thing around the gender roles and
Oh, it's a
the
whole nother layer.
boundaries, it's like it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying to say if it wasn't
Yeah.
work. So like understanding and appreciating that, while also communicating what my needs are, and that sometimes may knock against, what his beliefs are,
Right.
and him being open to change, and thankfully he is. Um, it's amazing, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but once I started taking 100% responsibility for how I was showing up in our relationship, it just, I just took all of the attention off of him and put it all onto me. And in a matter of weeks, or maybe a couple of months, um, I started to see that shift, and I started, the wall started coming down on both sides of us, and we were really able to open up. And we still have we we still have a lot of work to do around communication, um, but it's just the emotional intimacy that we have now, and we've been married 14 years. We've been together for 21 years. So we've been together a long time,
Mm.
and we're just now starting to really have that emotional intimacy that, everybody wants.
Yeah. It's crazy. That's
It's
like,
crazy.
yeah, it's huge. In those conversations, like I said, that I had during this workshop, it was like it's hard because, like, I think you're gonna get, like, you're obviously, like you said, you've always been in this space of, um coaching others. Like, you're obviously in most cases, if that's always been your realm, you're probably a highly sensitive person
Yeah.
who is, attuned to other people's emotions. Um and it's like, and that can be like innate. It could come from some kind of situation in your upbringing where you had to be emotionally attuned to other people's shit.
Mm-hmm.
um there's so many things, but my point is that there are people who are, I think, because they're in that space a little bit closer to being able to have these vulnerable open conversations. And then unfortunately, and this is, I'm not saying, that one group of people is better than another, because it's just, we're all on a journey and that it is what it is. But there is, I think, a space that you can be in where you're just like not ready to even go there. And it has so much to do with your upbringing and like your comfort around that vulnerability piece. Um, we already talked a little bit about sort of like the overexpression of like masculine energy that in that sort of little bit of a like a tougher exterior, right? That's not just for men, that's for women in this generation too. And
Oh yeah.
in who are, you know, what I'm saying. So there's a wall up too for so many women of like, I can't show you. I cannot show you what's really going on. Why? Because, like you said, we were really not taught to sit with that full arc of emotion, even within ourselves, for ourselves, let alone show somebody else that. And unfortunately, the only way for somebody to have empathy and compassion for what your needs are, because ideally with your partner, right, they love you. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that love, you need more than that. Nobody can feel empathy or compassion for anything that you're experiencing unless you can communicate it openly. Um, yeah, so I try to give, sort of language, examples of language to use, like, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
I feel this as a result of
Yes.
this or
Yes.
whatever it might be. That's how we turn around,
I have to
like
have
you
my
were
cheat
saying.
sheet. I
Yeah,
set
there you
myself a
go.
blank here.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, but it's exactly what you were just saying about finding ways to turn the focus away from them. I think one of, you're saying your big revelations, right? Like for me, most recently, I always felt like I always had this frustration with my husband for not being as dedicated to his own wellness as I am.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, it's like turning that focus onto myself. Okay, why do I feel this frustration around what he's doing with his life? When I have at least gotten to a point in my life now where I can realize that everyone is on their own journey and that there is nothing I can do to expedite that for him and to change that for him. When you're ready to do what you got to do, you're going to do it, not a minute before. So, but it's like, what is my attachment to that? My attachment to that is that the more invested I am emotionally in the wellness and well-being of my husband, the more great wife badges I get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, I am it's what I'm supposed to do. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to just be like supporting you in every way. And what kind of a wife would I be if I wasn't like, "Here, try this, honey. Oh, but that didn't work. Okay, let me find something else that works for you. This is still bothering you. Okay, like let's figure this out together." So it's like, so you have that piece, right? Then that's like, there's so much to that, right? Of like
Yeah.
trying to do
Exactly.
there's so much to that, like trying to do
Control.
all the shoulds, but there's more. But here I am also at the same time. And for like, I just like to, say it for the mothers who are listening, who are doing some of the same shit, right? Um, where not only is it validating me, but it's also giving me more shit to do. More shit to worry about in my
Yeah.
head, taking up more space than I need for me. So it's like,
Yep.
yeah, we have to be able to look at ourselves. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it's like, oh, but also we need guidance to do that. I think a lot of times, and that was that other piece, right? Asking for the support you need. It's not just from your partners or from your parents if you need like
Oh,
somebody to
yeah.
watch the kids or whatever it is, right? It's like the support is there in the world of coaches, of therapists, of energy workers, of find what feels good and like get somebody's support, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to see sometimes on our own as much
Completely.
as we want to do the work. Because I've always been committed to doing the work, but it
Yeah.
took other people to point things out to me, for me to, I still did the work, but I needed that guidance, or that pointer, that navigation,
Yeah.
and then a little hand holding, a little bit.
By the way, well, I'm just curious, this is what's coming up for me right now. Before you worked with your first coach, like did you like, before that, did you ever see yourself working with a coach or like did you have like um misconceptions around like what it meant to work with a coach or to be a coach and like the industry and stuff like that? I always ask because it's kind of like funny how there's always like a little stigma around one industry or another. And I'm that person, right? Who is just like, if you asked me like 2 or 3 years before I worked with my first coach, like, or like it was in conversation, I would probably have rolled my eyes, you know? And then, but then I met
It's
my
so
coach
funny.
and I literally hired her on the spot because I just was like, you're the person who's going to support me in this. Like, I just, the energy was there and it was done. But so I always ask that because it's like there's always a shift.
That's funny. I mean, I was literally just thinking about that today and talking about that today of like explaining what coaching is, to people who have never had a coach before. Because, yeah, I'm the same way as you, Sam. Like, I don't know, when did life coaching become like a thing? I can't remember years ago, but I remember like, who needs a coach for life? That's ridiculous. You don't know how to do life. That's kind of what it was,
Right.
when I
I've
first heard
heard this
about
one.
life coaching. And so, y- yeah, my first coach actually was someone local, and she and I knew each other through networking, and so, she had sort of a similar journey as me, and she had found like she had honed in on what her dreams were and pursued them. So she came from a background of finance, and um, then she was doing coaching, obviously, and so like she got me.
Mm.
She totally got where I was coming from. She had been in the same boats, and she was able to, some of the tools that she used were really, really intriguing to me around just like understanding more of who I was, um, through like a personality type of assessment. So I think she used the Strengths Finder. I don't know if you've ever used that one. Um, that was such an eye-opening exercise for me to look at myself through a lens of my strengths.
Mm.
And so that's why I decided to hire her. It was largely like based on, our rapport, and then me knowing that she had been where I was in the past, and she found a way to navigate through it, and she had the tools. She knew what tools to use. So it was sort of like I could do this on my own, but I never did.
Right.
I'd been thinking about this for years. Um, whereas, we worked together for 3 or 4 months, and I was able to get a game plan together and take the
Right.
action steps and have someone hold me accountable. have someone hold me accountable to take those steps, which, it's huge.
The accountability piece is huge. Yeah. Um, and the first the first coach that I ever worked with, I hired her mostly I thought was going to be to kind of yeah, like to gather my thoughts and like come up with a plan as far as like what my real business and purpose would be, because I already had an inkling and I was like trying to figure it out and trying to like build yoga into it and like whatever. And, you know, it ended up being something totally different. I mean, we worked through all of my anxieties and limiting beliefs within a matter of months. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. And because
Hmm.
none of that, and I remember like this was my biggest thing. It's like, oh, this is why I want to be a coach because it's like none of these other bigger picture things that I really want to make happen and do. Like I have all these ideas and I'm so excited and this is like new beginnings and yada yada. Nothing is going to come to fruition if you don't work on yourself first. And you will hit wall after wall of blockages and judgments and
Right.
like all of and limitations if you skip those steps. Um so and that's why I talk about self-care now because it's like we can't skip the step of loving ourselves, of prioritizing ourselves, and obviously the piece of like the wellness piece too, right? Mental wellness, physical wellness, we need that. But it's like we can't skip the work. We can't skip the work on ourselves because it all especially if we're starting a business because that's like we were talking about like the journey of entrepreneurship being like a total smack in the head.
Yeah.
um but it's like yeah, we can't skip those steps, especially like
It all comes out.
yeah. Oh, it all comes out layer after layer, right? Which is good because it's like, okay, this, right? Like the roller coaster of it is annoying, but it's a catalyst for dealing with
Yeah.
all the things, right? Like addressing the elephant in the room that it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't work on that one yet. um, so,
Uh-huh. Yep.
yeah. So, we can't skip those steps. And that's how I equated to self-care too, because going back to what we were saying about especially for women about that fulfillment piece, like we are told that we're going to check off all these boxes and have this sort of aesthetic as far as um in order to be fulfilled, and this is what it's going to look like, and then we're not. So what happens next? We want something more, we want something bigger. I don't know what, doesn't matter what it is. It could be starting a business, it could be doing that thing that you always wanted to do, like doing, for me, part of it's more self-care for me now, but like the music piece, like, spending a lot of time on that because it makes me feel good. Like it could be a
Hmm.
passion, a hobby, whatever it is. Whatever it is that is missing, so you want more now. But in order to really enact that bigger change in your life where it's not just like, oh, like I do yoga now every now and then for self-care. Okay, those are the little things. What is like what's going to fulfill you? What's the big thing? So we need to like get everything else in line before we can really jump on that big thing that we want because we deserve it.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. um
Yes.
I feel like you're
Um,
freezing a little bit, but that's okay. Oh no, I
have you
hear you now.
have you
Okay, good.
have you read this book? Um, this book that was really powerful for me. I don't know if you've read it. It's called "Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It."
No. Sounds like a good one.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good one. It's a really good one. I've spent a lot of time. There's some exercises in there, and they're super simple exercises. Just a lot of time on self love to be able
Mm,
to be able to do the work. Um, because I I focused on this. I did. I made a lot of I had a lot of transformation very quickly, and so I took my eye off of it for a while. And as soon as I took the eye off my self love, everything sort of started screeching, slowing
Mhm.
down to a halt. And I realized, you don't check that box off. That's something you have to continuously work on every single day, all the time. And without it, it's going to be a long, hard road to get what you want or to figure out what you want or to have the transformation that you're looking for in your life.
Completely. Yeah. That's why they say healing is not linear because it's like everything comes back around. It's like it's more of a spiral, like a squiggly line. That's why it's like this total roller coaster.
Yes,
Yeah, it's not everything is
yes,
going to come back up again. Um and once again, it's why I focus on self-care because it's like you need these practices in place for when the shit does come up again. You even if it's like a strange relationship with a family member or whatever the hell it is, unless you're, planning to distance yourself completely, that stuff's going to come up again and again. So it's like we need that awareness and we need like potentially like a self-soothing practice to be able to work through it more fluidly, to stay on our path. Because otherwise, yeah, you get sucked right back in to the where you were
hmm
before, right? I always find that like as I work through something, it's going to come up again and again, but it does get easier and easier to move through it. Not past it, not moving on, right? Because that's like, we're grazing over it. But it gets easier, like just by a hair each time, a little easier and a little easier to
yes,
move through it. But that will not happen again unless you're really allowing yourself to feel everything. Um, but yeah, and that's a part of it. But I love that. Thank you for bringing up the book. I will put that in the caption of the video too, because anything that anytime there's like a resource, like I always try to like make sure it's down there so everybody can check it out. Um, so I always want to like I always try to close these interviews by asking you just a couple questions. Like one of the things that I like to ask is what are your go-to or non-negotiable forms of self-care? Like things that you do that work for you, whether it's like a self-soothing practice or whether it's like a non-negotiable like daily thing.
yeah. So every day I have to start my day with either meditation or self hypnosis. Um, the visualization of self hypnosis is incredibly powerful for me. Um, so I do that, and I always do a short little devotional. And then, I vary my routine up, but I always take a walk in the morning, just a short little walk. Um, and I'm kind of hit and miss with the journal. Journaling is so powerful for me when I do it, but I can't seem to get consistent with it. But I
I
never
feel
give up.
you. I'm with you there.
I never give up. And yeah, and I also end my day with a meditation or a self hypnosis. And sometimes during the middle of the day, I'll vary it up. I like will do some dancing, I'll do some breath work, or just something in the middle of the day, just re-energize and reset.
Yeah,
Because I find, a few hours in, I've got to get a reset.
totally. That's awesome. The dancing, I love that. That's been something for me too lately because I used to listen to music like all day long. And so like the random like, 5-minute dance party would just happen. But for some reason that just like fell off in the last year or so. I don't know why, but it did. And so that bringing that back in recently, just in general, like bringing music back in a much bigger way in recent months has been huge for me. But also, yeah, like I've been not holding back when like an upbeat like song, like my jam comes on and if I feel my hips moving, it's
Yeah.
like, why am I not just letting this go where it's gonna go? Because that, I mean, again, from a physical perspective and like in a even physiology perspective, like moving your body in that way, it's unbelievably beneficial. Like you're literally shaking out tension in like your connective tissue and like it helps
Yes.
your vagus nerve that runs up and down your spine that controls the connection between your heart
Mm,
or your head and your heart and your gut. Like it's unbelievably beneficial, but of course, these things are just less talked about and, less, ideally and hopefully I feel like a lot of this stuff is on its way to being more mainstream and there's a lot of waking up going on right now. But yeah, that's, it's like especially if your body
yeah.
is
Yeah.
doing it,
I agree.
right? Like if you feel it in your bones as we say, right? That's like your intuition telling you to move, like do it. Um, it's so big.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And y- it and I used to, schedule things in all the time
Right.
and being spontaneous about, you know, having a dance party, while I'm making dinner or whatever. Like um, it feels so, it's like so fun. It's a Tuesday and I'm
Right.
dancing
And
around making dinner.
that
It's just
playful
like, just because
yeah.
it's Tuesday doesn't mean we can't have fun.
Right. That playful space, I think, is equally important, kinda like coming full circle. It's equally important because I think it almost does the same thing as that slowing down that we talked about and being present and mindful. It's like, you know, when you can be playful, you're present. Right? Like, you can't be playful and be thinking about the past or the future. You
Hmm.
can't be playful in the midst of an anxiety attack, you know? So and, there's
Hmm.
really something to be said about, when you have kids and you remember how to be playful, and, instead of
Yes.
trying to be the perfect mom and control all of the things and check off all the boxes and make sure this is just so and make sure this is just so and do all that, you can't be playful when you're doing all of that. So there is, of course, something to be said about the connection with your kids, regardless of their age, really, when you remember how to just like, just be playful and like silly and present, you know?
Yes.
Anyway, this has been an amazing conversation. I
Yeah.
really
It's so
appreciate it.
true.
So glad we got to know each other. um,
Me too. Me too. I love
yeah.
it.
Perfect. So I'm gonna make. I just want to give you the opportunity. Let us know where to find you, whether that's on your website or on social media, and I'll make sure to put that in the notes as well.
Yeah, I'd love to give you the link to my Facebook group. It's kind of long,
Yeah.
but it's called From the Overwhelmed to the Connection on Facebook. Or you can find me under at my website as well. It's www.melissasalmeron.com. Does anyone say www anymore? I don't know where that came from.
Just so yeah, just so nobody's confused. Yeah. I get it though. I agree with you. I'm like, I don't know, like how do we do this now? um Beautiful. Yeah,
That's so funny.
I'm learning. Um So yeah, this has been great. I'm sure I would love to connect again and let's stay connected. Maybe we can like even collaborate on some things considering, we're both moms And we both work with
Yeah.
moms, and it's like, again, it's like heal the mother. Let's go. Let's focus
Yes.
on,
I mean,
we shift
the
things,
ripple
when we do
effect.
this. Yes, it's a massive ripple effect completely.
Yes.
Um, so again, I want to thank you for anybody who's listening, whether you're catching this live or whether you're um, replaying this. I would love if you would follow the show. Again, it's Self Care is My Job. We're on YouTube, so you can go subscribe on most of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google. So definitely follow us. We've got to get this message of self care out because, like we said, we can't skip steps. We got to do this stuff for